Most people believe poverty is about money. It is not. It is about playing the wrong game without knowing the rules. If you start with nothing and still play honestly, you will lose every single time. So tonight, I am going to point out 3 things that the truly wealthy do that are never discussed publicly. The first thing that they do is they control the creation of money itself. In fact, the real elite do not just earn money, they actually determine what becomes money and who gets to create it. If you ask before how the wealthy really got rich, their answers usually are, they invested wisely, they worked hard. That is not the real answer. The wealthy do not compete in markets, they create monopolies and cartels. You are told that capitalism is about competition, but the actual rich spend all their energy eliminating competition, not participating in it. And the third thing is that generational wealth comes from capturing legal privileges, not from merit or innovation. Specifically, the truly wealthy families got rich by getting governments to give them exclusive rights, monopoly charters, and legal protections that nobody else has access to. They used political power to rig the game permanently. But as we will discuss, that is never mentioned in business school, because the real game is about power, not economics. You would understand wealth completely differently if you knew this. You would see that every major fortune in history came from these 3 game strategies. This behavior is deliberately concealed. If you think about it, what you should really understand is that there is a secret game that only the elite know about. Because once you understand the secret game, and given the fact that it has been played the same way for centuries, you can actually see through all the lies. So if you understand the game, you are far better able to see reality. You are far more likely to understand why you are poor and they are rich. But instead you believe in meritocracy. Competition does not make sense when the rich do not compete. The most that regular people can hope for is maybe to start a small business if they are really, really lucky, but they are not going to build dynastic wealth. They are not going to join the elite families. The situation as it is really corrupt, where the game is completely rigged at a level most people cannot even see. And so the question I want to look at today is, what is this secret wealth game? How has it been hidden throughout history? And the answer I will show you is because if regular people understood this game, they would overthrow the system immediately. The elite created this secret wealth game that has been carefully hidden throughout history, in which only the inner circle plays today. Because if everyone knew the rules, the whole system would collapse. Does that make sense? So first, I want to go into some history and explain to you how we got to where we are. This is Europe in the late medieval period, around 1400 to 1500. As you can see, most wealth was controlled by monarchs, the church, and a small number of noble families. This was a world where wealth came from land ownership and political power, not from markets or merit. So how did certain families break into the system? The first thing you need to understand is that for most of history, the economy was controlled by guilds, by feudal lords, by kings. People could not just start businesses. They needed permission, licenses, charters from authorities. The idea of free enterprise did not exist in any real sense. And at this time in history, the main challenge was how to become wealthy when all the land was already owned and all the power was already held by existing elites. If you wanted to get rich, you could not just work hard or innovate. And at this point in history, you needed to get the king or the church to give you special privileges. You needed a monopoly charter. But then a new opportunity emerged. The age of exploration created new trade routes, and so suddenly, there was enormous wealth to be made in long-distance trade. And so now certain merchant families had an opportunity, but they needed royal backing to exclude competition. They needed to create a new kind of game. The most valuable economic activity was long-distance trade in luxury goods. If you controlled trade routes, you controlled everything. I'm talking about spices, silk, precious metals. These commodities generated enormous profits. In fact, if you controlled a trade monopoly, you could become wealthier than kings. You became one of the most powerful forces in the world. That is how valuable these monopolies were. And so now the emerging merchant class and ambitious families had a problem because they could not compete with each other without destroying profits. So they had to discover a way to eliminate competition legally. And this is where it gets brilliant, because pure competition would destroy everyone's profits. So what happened? Well, what happened was that they started to create 3 specific strategies. So now what is going to happen is you will have the emergence of chartered monopoly companies, central banking control, and legal privilege capture, mainly to build permanent wealth that could not be competed away. So how this was accomplished was first the chartered monopoly company. The merchant families, because they needed to eliminate competition, decided to get the king to grant them exclusive trading rights, so they needed a legal structure. So what happened was they created joint stock companies with real charters, obtained monopoly rights to entire regions of trade, used state violence to enforce their monopolies, and shared profits with the crown to maintain the arrangement. Second strategy that was created was controlling the money supply. So the merchants had gotten monopolies, but they needed even more power over the economy. Now the solution was to control who creates money and how much exists, because that is ultimate power. You could determine who gets loans and who does not. You could also inflate or deflate the currency. And the reason why authorities allowed this is that kings needed to borrow money, and the merchants could provide it if given control. So the wealthy families had created a system where they literally controlled the creation of money itself. So they just made themselves the gatekeepers of all finance. But the third strategy that was used was capturing legal privileges permanently. So all this wealth was being generated from monopolies and money creation, and what the elite families realized is, hey, we need to make this permanent to pass it to our children, to embed it in law. So now the concept of hereditary corporate privilege was born. And the most important aspect of this, of course, was that it was protected by the state and embedded in legal codes that could not easily be changed. So this was a system of permanent advantage that made certain families wealthy forever while preventing anyone else from using the same strategies. So now you have this new game where regular commerce based on actual competition is being replaced by something completely different. And because of how it is structured, this new system became incredibly profitable, self-perpetuating, and impenetrable. Incredibly profitable just means that monopolies generate massive returns with no competition. Self-perpetuating just means that now the wealth creates more wealth automatically. The elite families design mechanisms that compound, so they control money creation, hold monopoly charters, pass privileges to heirs. They have created permanent advantage. The last thing is impenetrable, which basically means that outsiders cannot break into the game, no matter how talented or hardworking, and there is no way to compete with legal monopolies. And you do not really understand that merit is completely irrelevant. So very quickly, even though some families became unimaginably wealthy very fast, they also ensured no one else could replicate their success because the system is designed to exclude everyone except the chosen few. It requires state backing that is not available to regular people. It punishes anyone who tries to compete now. And because of this, what is happening is that the wealthy families, the banking dynasties, especially the Medicis, Fuggers, and later the Rothschilds are becoming much more powerful, entrenched, and untouchable. And now that you have this wealth concentration, what is going to happen is that the ideology is going to be created to hide it. So the old feudal system was based on obvious inherited privilege, where everyone could see that nobles had advantages. But that was based on bloodline and military power. So that is what the old system looked like. Now the emerging capitalist system and its beneficiaries needed to hide this new form of privilege to make monopoly power seem like merit. And so they developed new stories, or we call them the mythology of the self-made man and free market capitalism. So imagine, feudalism is really about accepting inherited hierarchy, but the new capitalist ideology insists on earned wealth, on competition, on the idea that anyone can succeed. The problem, though, is that people could see that certain families stayed wealthy for generations. Many of them questioned how this was possible in a competitive system, but most believed the propaganda. So what is going to happen is that the elite families and the intellectuals they funded are going to decide to create an elaborate mythology. So I want to very quickly show you the difference between what people are told about wealth and what actually happens. But the main thing you need to know is that billions and billions of people believe a complete lie. In fact, people spend their whole lives thinking they live in a competitive meritocracy when they actually live in a rigged monopoly system. And so this creates acceptance of inequality, because if you are told the wealthy earned it through merit, why would you question their power? You are a regular person. You see billionaires with enormous wealth. It is really powerful because now the elite have wealth and power, but nobody understands how they got it. What this means is that people will not challenge the system because they think it is fair. They will just try harder at strategies that cannot create dynastic wealth. Does that make sense? So now, if you are a regular person, you believe the mythology completely. I live in a free market. The wealthy earn their position. I could theoretically become rich too if I work hard enough. And the elite stay safe because unlike obvious aristocracy where people revolt, This system makes people accept inequality as deserved. It is impossible to challenge a system when everyone thinks it is fair and based on merit. So now the question is, why would regular people, why would they believe these lies? Because remember, the elite obviously got rich through completely different methods than what they claim. So the way this works is you have some powerful mechanisms. You have constant propaganda, and you have what we call controlled education, or the academic media complex, because both regular people and the elite exist in the same society but learn completely different things about how it works. And the major force that maintains these lies, of course, were universities and mainstream media. But during this time, there was growing wealth inequality, and the elite needed to prevent people from discovering the secret game as much as possible. If you study actual wealthy families, and you see they all use monopoly charters, state backing, and financial control, they do not care. They will tell you those are exceptions or outdated examples. It is not the real pattern. If they believe that modern capitalism is different and competitive, this story serves their interests, and they will maintain it through universities and through prestigious academic positions and media platforms. Does that make sense? So now what is going to happen is this. What is going to happen is that all competitors, anyone who tries to enter the market, are going to be blocked by law. The elite is going to use state power to maintain exclusive control. So basically the entire deal is the elite get permanent monopoly and everyone else is legally prevented from competing. So basically the elite control an entire industry forever, and then anyone who tries to compete gets arrested or destroyed. So very quickly, this enriched the elite families beyond measure. But not only this, prevented anyone else from using the same strategy. But not only that, but you also have the second strategy as well, and the same idea. The elite control the creation and supply of money itself, to determine who gets capital and who does not, and then everyone else must borrow from them at interest, and then the wealth flows automatically to whoever controls money creation. The elite get richer just by controlling the monetary system, while everyone else pays interest forever. Now the question is, how do the elite actually maintain this game? How do the elite create a situation where they are the only ones who can use these strategies? And the answer is, the elite simply capture the state and write the laws themselves. So this is what actually happened. So this is how the secret game really works. So let us look at the three strategies in more detail. The elite had to execute these perfectly. The elite had to use state power while claiming to support free markets. The question then is, how do they do this? And the answer is very simple. They use a very specific mechanism called regulatory capture. Before, if you were trying to get rich through competition, and the official story said markets are free and open, you would face ruthless competition and probably fail. But now, as you understand the secret game, you can use government to eliminate all competition and create permanent monopoly. So now, what is going to happen is that once you understand regulatory capture, you can build monopoly power that cannot be challenged. And let me explain this mechanism in detail. The first mechanism is, of course, regulatory capture. So the elite do not want competition. They want to control the regulators who are supposed to prevent monopolies. This is what we call the revolving door. So when you capture regulatory agencies, not only do you prevent competition, but you make it look legal and proper. This is the legitimization of monopoly, but they will never teach you this in business school. Through the education system, including economics departments and business programs, you are taught that regulations prevent monopolies. Who cares that elites write the regulations? But the elite understand this. They understand that regulatory agencies can be captured, and then they staff these agencies with their own people, or people who want jobs at elite firms where the game becomes rigged from the inside. So now you have regulators who approve mergers, allow monopolistic practices, and block new competitors. This is how the elite actually eliminate competition legally. It makes it impossible for outsiders to compete. It allows monopolies to exist with government blessing and creates the appearance of legitimate market outcomes. Does this make sense? The second thing that enables the secret game is control of central banking. So what do I mean by that? The elite, when they want ultimate power, what they do is control who creates money and how much exists. So they understand that whoever controls money creation controls everything. And when you control central banks, what happens? You learn that money is created through lending. But when you understand this power, what do? You learn that the elite families literally own or control the central banks in most countries. When you are controlling money creation, you are learning about how the Federal Reserve works. You are learning how the Bank of England was created. You are learning how money is debt created by private banks. And as a result, you have unlimited power over the economy. And therefore you should try your best to understand that this is the ultimate secret knowledge. And also, what is really important is that central banking allows for infinite wealth extraction. So if you are trying to get rich through earning or investing, you are playing with money that already exists. But if you control money creation itself, you have power over everything. You might even control nations. So understanding how central banking really works is basically learning the most hidden part of the secret game. The idea is that throughout history, elite banking families have controlled central banks, and their approach will be to keep this knowledge completely hidden from the public, and it works really well. This is how the truly wealthy maintain power. And it works really well because remember, if you are trying to build wealth, you are competing for existing money because you do not know money creation is controlled by private families. There is really no way to reach elite levels without this knowledge. But if you are in the inner circle and you understand central banking and you know that money creation is the ultimate power, you have godlike control over economies, and then you benefit from creating money itself rather than earning it. And that is how the real elite maintain their position. And the third thing, of course, is legal privilege capture. If you get laws passed that give you advantages nobody else has, you win permanently. That is what happens when elites lobby for tax codes that favor them or intellectual property laws that create monopolies. There is nothing accidental about how laws are written. And so these three things, regulatory capture, central banking control, or the idea of controlling money creation itself, controlling the money supply, and legal privilege embedded in law, created how all dynastic fortunes are built. So, as you can see, the elite play the secret game, and this is why wealth concentration keeps increasing. And even though they tell you about competition and merit, what is important for us to understand is the elite do the exact opposite. So let me give you an example of this. This is how actual billionaires today maintain wealth. And as you can see, they all use some combination of monopoly power, financial control, and regulatory capture. We are talking about tech monopolies, banking dynasties, defense contractors with government connections. There are specific patterns across all major fortunes, but what you need to understand is none of this would be possible without the secret game. Because why do people still believe in competitive markets when monopolies are so obvious? Because the propaganda is overwhelming and constant. Because the education system never teaches the secret game. If you understand how you are being controlled, you at least see reality. You stop blaming yourself, and what you can do is spread this knowledge to others. So what we should work toward is making the secret game visible to everyone. And it is important because if enough people understand how they are being controlled, maybe the system can eventually change.